Before the election last year, you made promises, as Fine Gael did as well, to distressed mortgage holders. And we have had a number of reports, but I have to say we've had limited action. You also said after the election that you'd act decisively, forcefully and effectively with the banks and anybody else in the interest of those who have mortgages and have difficulty paying them. Now, we're all aware that the ECB reduced the interest rate in November and December, and some of the banks took longer than others, but most of the banks reduced the interest rate being charged to mortgage holders. However, the ITSB, or I think it's known to a lot of people as the permanent TSB, have 115,000 mortgage holders. And about 40 of those are on variable or fixed rates, but fixed rates that will come to an end in the near future. The TSB is charging 5.19% on a variable mortgage. AIB is charging 3.04%. Bank of Ireland, 3.55%. And if you look at, for example, the Ulster Bank, which is not a covered institution, it's 4.9%. It even is cheaper. In fact, I understand ITSB is the highest rate on a variable mortgage, not only in Ireland, but in Europe. And if we look at the effect of this on people, if you have a €200,000 mortgage, and if you just take the interest only, at 5.19%, it's €200 a week. If you drop to 4%, it's €154 a week. And if you go down to the AIB rate of 3.04, it drops to €116 a week. Now, can you imagine the difference between €116 a week and €200 a week for a hard-pressed mortgage payment? And here we're talking about a 99% state-owned institution and one of the covered institutions. And basically, people are trapped with this mortgage holder because if you're negative equity, you can't move to another lender. They won't lend you the money. And I have to say, I think it's despicable behaviour on the behalf of the ITSB that they're charging these rates. Now, I will give credit to Michael Noonan, to Minister Michael Noonan, because he used his powers of persuasion on the AIB.
Thank you, Deputy.
And we did see the rate reduced to 3%. And what I would ask is, what is the government going to do to bring the ITSB rate down? And imagine the relief it would give a huge number of people if you could bring it down to the same rate as the AIB. And I'd like to hear from you today, what are you going to do to bring this rate down and give relief in the most effective way of all to people, and that is by reducing their payment permanently by reducing the interest rate?
Thank you. Tánaiste.
Well, first of all, I thank Deputy O'Keefe for raising this issue because the Government very much shares the concern that he has expressed about the difficulties that mortgage holders are having, both in respect of the interest rates that are being charged by some institutions and also, indeed, the difficulties that they're having in respect of arrears and the pressure that's on them. The Government has, of course, acted on this area. As you know, last month in the budget, the Government introduced an expanded mortgage interest relief scheme for first-time buyers who purchased their home in the boom years of 2004 to 2008, and many of whom are in mortgage arrears at present. The ECB cut their interest rate by 0.5% in the past 2 months, which immediately reduced tracker mortgages, and some banks have announced that there will be reductions passed on to other categories of mortgage holders. The financial regulator will be engaging intensively with the banks to ensure that certain mortgage customers are not to be unfairly discriminated against when it comes to passing on savings. The Government is taking urgent action on mortgage arrears. We will be proposing new schemes for the banks and will immediately be introducing pilot schemes in the local authorities that will allow people to stay in their own homes, if at all feasible. The focus of the Government is to develop and implement schemes to assist those who cannot afford to pay their mortgages, but allows as many people as possible to remain in their homes. We are progressing personal insolvency legislation, which was one of the recommendations that was contained in the Keane report, and proposals in relation to personal insolvency, which will address the issue of mortgage, the difficulties that people have with repayment of mortgages, is to be circulated to government in the very near future. In addition to that, in order to progress the proposals that were made in the Keane report, we've established a steering group, a project team effectively, within the Department of Finance, which is drawn from officials from a number of government departments who have responsibility for dealing with mortgage issues. The Department of Social Protection, Department of Environment and Local Government in respect of the housing side of the local authority areas. We are pursuing a number of options which would provide relief for people with mortgage difficulties, including trade-down mortgages, split mortgages, mortgage to rent, and a number of other pilot schemes that are being progressed through the Department of Environment and Local Government. So I want to assure the Deputy that, first of all, the difficulties that people are having with mortgages, either in respect of the interest rates which are being charged or the difficulties that they're having in repaying mortgages, is being addressed as a priority by government, and we'd be happy to discuss the detail of the different measures that we are taking at any time in the House.
Thank you. Deputy O'Keefe.
There are many things that you mentioned there that I'd love to debate with you in detail, but I just want to focus today on the very simple proposition that the government, who are 99% owners of ITSB, make sure that their rates are no longer subprime rates or usury rates, and are come down to the level of the other banks in the 3 to 3.5% rate. That would be a huge saving for people. And if you did that for those customers, it might be the resolution of their problem, and they might need all of these other rather complicated solutions that people are proposing. And therefore, if you want to keep people in their homes, the first thing to do is to make sure that the market reacts to what the ECB did. And the reason the ECB brought down the interest rate was to make it cheaper to borrow money. And what has happened here is that one major lender in the mortgage market has refused to come down, even though it's owned by the government, has refused to come down to reasonable rates. So what I'm asking you is, will the Minister of Finance ensure that ITSB reduces its interest rate from the punitive 5.19% to, for example, the AIB rate of 3%. Now, if you did that, you would ensure huge relief for very many people who find it impossible to pay the €200 on the 200,000 a week, but could pay the €116 a week, and that would resolve their problems. And the irony of this is, if you actually did this, the government would save money, because, of course, the interest relief you're given, is proportionate to the interest paid. So you would actually make a saving as a government too, in terms of government finances, by forcing ITSB to reduce the rate. So, whereas there are lots of things I'd love to discuss here today, lots of points you've made that are interesting debating points. Simple question today: will the government ensure ITSB bring down the rate as they did with AIB? I compliment you for what you did with AIB. It's a job half done. Now finish the job.
Well, first of all, I was responding in the early part of my response to the allegation that Deputy O'Keefe made that the government was not dealing with the mortgage issue, and I think I have satisfied him that in fact the government is dealing with the mortgage issue and is dealing very comprehensively with the mortgage issue, both in respect of interest rates and in respect of mortgage arrears. With regard to the specific issue that he has raised and the specific interest rate in this case, as he is aware, the government has spoken with the financial institutions and is in contact with the financial institutions. There is a role for the financial regulator in respect of dealing with the individual institutions in respect of their interest rates. And as I have said earlier, the financial regulator will be engaging intensively with the financial institutions to ensure that certain mortgage customers will not be treated in a discriminatory manner that there will be fairness in respect of the levels of interest that are applied across the board, and that the reductions in the interest rate which are applied by the European Central Bank are in fact passed on to customers. Now, the way in which different institutions do it, it varies. Some institutions have already passed on some reductions, some institutions didn't, so it does vary from institution to institution, but we are anxious to ensure that there is not discriminatory practices as between one institution and another, or between one customer and another, and the financial regulator's job is to deal with the institutions in respect of that. And I'd be quite happy, and I'm sure the Minister for Finance will be quite happy, to return to the House at some suitable point and address that again.
Thank you, Deputy MacDonald.
Tánaiste, today the Troika will give their verdict on the first full year of implementing the so-called bailout. And I, for one, have no doubt that they'll place a big gold star on your copybook in recognition of your policy of cutback and the ongoing assault that you head on the livelihoods of low and middle-income earners. I've no doubt that they'll tell us that we're getting there, that we're ticking the boxes, that we're meeting our targets. But Tánaiste, tell us, where exactly are we going? And what kind of a society will we be left with when we get there? You know as well as I that the domestic economy is in a heap. Growth forecasts are routinely revised downwards. Unemployment is higher than when your government came to office. And thousands of young people emigrate. And now you cast your beady eye on valuable state assets. And you even sabre rattle in respect of the increments of low-paid public and civil servants. So tell us, Tánaiste, what is your assessment of the first full year of the bailout, of the austerity, as your government indeed approaches its first year anniversary in office? And tell us, as Tánaiste and indeed as leader of the Labour Party, is it your view that we are in fact heading in the right direction?
Thank you, Deputy. Tánaiste.
Yeah, I'm very happy to answer those questions. My assessment of the situation is this. We inherited biggest economic mess, I think, that any incoming government ever inherited. When we came into office last March, the banking system was broken, the economy was broken, and the country had been put, as my colleague Deputy Rory Quinn has often said, effectively into receivership by the previous government through the arrangements that were made with the Troika. What this government is doing and where we are going is we are taking the country to recovery, and we're making progress on that. Now, I don't want to exaggerate the progress that we're making, because the path that we have to travel to do this is a very painful path for people in this country, particularly people who have lost jobs, people who are difficulty with paying their mortgages, people who are difficulty making ends meet. There is no easy passage here, but we are on the way to recovery, and we are doing that. And whatever assessment the Troika make of the government's performance, and I expect that it will be a positive assessment, as far as the government is concerned, is not about gold stars on the copybooks or anything like that. As far as we are concerned, it is another milestone on the way to recovery. And if you look at some of the things that we have managed to achieve to date, first of all, for the first time in 4 years, the Irish economy is growing again. It's very modest growth, but it is growing. The figures that were published yesterday in respect of our trade performance, our exports, show that we have the biggest trade surplus now in the history of the state. That's progress, and it's progress that has been made by the government and the strategy that we have pursued in expanding our exports and trade abroad in order that businesses can grow here. The performance of the IDA, for example, in inward investment, the report of which was published by Minister Richard Bruton a couple of weeks ago, which showed significant progress in inward investment and the creation of jobs here. The budgets that we introduced, which even in difficult times we have been able to take 330,000 people out of the universal social charge that was introduced by the previous government. 1.8 million workers in this country who will not be paying additional income tax in 2012 as against what they were paying in 2011. 1 million people who are on social welfare payments whose basic rates of social welfare will not have been reduced in 2012 as against 2011. That is real progress in very difficult times, and we will continue that progress. And I think that, and I know that you and other colleagues here in the House have been talking with the Troika during their visit here, it would be helpful if on this occasion that you were to pull on the green jersey, assist the government of the country in dealing with the negotiations that we have to have with the Troika, and help the government. And yes, I did do it. Yes, indeed, I did do it. And I did do it. I did do it. And help the government achieve the objective that we have, which is to get the country's economy to recover, get us out of the bailout, say goodbye to the IMF and the ECB, and recover our economic independence again.
Deputy MacDonald.
Tánaiste, I'm certain that I am not alone in the sheer boredom and tedium that I feel when I hear you talk yet again about your inheritance. You're in government now. This is your gig, and all of this is happening on your watch. And can I say to you, Tánaiste...
Sorry, could we have a bit of order, please?
Can I say to you, Tánaiste...
Bit of order, please.
...that it is utterly perverse for you to ask people to pull on the green jersey in order to bring about cutbacks in our schools, to the health system, to take 500,000 home help hours out of the system. That's not the stuff of the green jersey. That is the stuff of seeking your gold star on your copybook from your friends in the Troika. You say that we're all about recovery, and you say that we're marking milestones. Well, let's look at the stated objectives of this bailout. The objectives were deficit reduction on the one hand and re-entering the money markets on the other. And on both of those counts, the bailout is failing. The deficit remains at 8.7 billion, and the interest rate on 10-year government bonds remains at 7.5%. So, without even rehearsing yet again all of the utter misery that the agenda of cutbacks that you so enthusiastically pursue, that all of that is bringing to people's lives, even by those objective measures, the bailout strategy is failing. And it defies logic that a person who bemoans their inheritance, who urges others to put on the green jersey, doesn't have the simple wit at this stage to realise that when you're in a hole, you stop digging, and when a course of action clearly is not working, you change tack. That's the stuff of wearing the green jersey. That's the stuff of good government. That's the stuff of protecting our national interests and, above all, protecting our citizens.
Tánaiste.
Well, first of all, I think, I think all of us here, whether we're in government or opposition, I think we owe it to the people that we represent in here to be straight with them. Now, when you talk, for example, Deputy MacDonald, about the reduction in the 7.5% interest rate that it now attaches to Irish bonds, you might also tell people that that is in fact now about half what it was last year. It's down, and it's going in the right direction. It's not where we want it. It's not where we want it to be. But it is going in the right direction, and you might at least acknowledge progress. Secondly, let me tell you this. There is nobody on this side of the House enthusiastic about cutting any service to the public of this country. But we are in an economic and a financial hole. We're in a situation, Deputy MacDonald, where we're short of money, and where that gap in money is made up by borrowing. And the approach that the government is taking, you have offered no realistic, and your party has offered no realistic, and unlike your colleagues north of the border, you are refusing to face up to the reality of the economic situation here. Because the policies that you would pursue would not just have the cuts that now have to be implemented in our services, but would be far deeper. Your approach, for example, refusing to repay... Yes, but you can't do that. You can't... Yes, of course. And that is all our policy. But you know, you don't get people back to work simply by making a declaration about it in Leinster House. It has to be worked upon, and you have to restore the confidence, international confidence in the country. In order to get people back to work, we have to persuade people outside of this country, first of all, to invest here to create jobs. We're doing that, and the proof of the pudding in that was the performance of the IDA last year. Secondly, we have to restore confidence within the country here so that we can grow our domestic economy, and dumping down on the country and dumping down on what we are doing as a country in order to bring about recovery doesn't do an awful lot to bring that about. And in respect of the money that we have to borrow in order to keep the state services going, what would you do if we weren't in a position to borrow that money? How much would you have to cut wages by? Are you going to go down to the Mater Hospital or to any other hospital in this country and tell the nurses that you're going to cut 30% of their wages? Are you going to tell old age pensioners, for example? Are you going to tell old age pensioners that you'd have to cut maybe up to €100 a week from their pension? Deputy MacDonald, it's time that you grew up and that you faced the economic reality that we are facing. And if you don't like what the government is doing, and that's fair enough, that is the privilege of opposition, then instead of coming in here every Thursday morning and bellyaching about it, you might come in and offer a few positive suggestions.
Deputy Shane Ross, thank you.
Thank you.
Could I have some order for Deputy Ross, please? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Cancilla. I was privileged to be on a delegation of the technical group to the Troika this week, and I have absolutely no doubt that they will give a very good report to the government today. The question is whether the government should be looking for or welcoming such a good report from the Troika. You know, we don't seem to get any payback from this extraordinary good behaviour on behalf of the government. And the news that broke this morning that Sarkozy and Merkel are once again looking to launch an attack on our corporate tax rate, admittedly in a concealed way, is very alarming. I want to this time they guise it in the form of talking about tax coordination, but it's basically the same thing, and as the Taoiseach said, the corporate tax base and a hurrying up of which they're looking for, the corporate tax base rate changes, is in fact a backdoor to changing the corporate tax rate. But there's a more alarming and immediate problem which I'd like to ask the Tánaiste about, and I think it's a very serious one, and I'd like a serious answer, not a necessarily political answer. There is a very serious proposal for a financial transactions tax which is coming down the line on Monday week. And Ireland's reaction to that is important, because the Tánaiste will be aware that that poses a real threat, again from Sarkozy and Merkel, to our IFSC. The IFSC, which employs 30,000 people, which accounts for, in terms of financial services sector, which accounts for about 20% of the corporate tax gathered in this country, is an absolutely vital part of the economy. Now, if the British stand away from the fiscal treaty which is being negotiated, which they have done, and we go in, which we look like we're absolutely intent on doing, the threat to the IFSC is serious and should not be underestimated. And the threat to those jobs is there.
Thank you.
What I'd like to the question then to the Tánaiste is this. Is the financial transaction tax a deal breaker? I know that the Taoiseach has not welcomed it. He said would not be welcome. But is it a deal breaker? Will we stand aside from the fiscal treaty proposed if a FTT, a financial transaction tax, is imposed?
Thank you. Tánaiste.
Well, there's a couple of elements to the question. First of all, I don't accept what Deputy Ross says, that there hasn't been payback for the country delivering on the targets in the agreement that we have with the EU, ECB and the IMF. There was last year a very practical and tangible payback when we secured a reduction in the interest rate, and the value of that payback in terms of our overall debt is about €10 billion. So that's very tangible. Secondly, of course, we are continuing to have technical discussions with the ECB in respect of a number of matters in relation to our overall financial situation. With regard to the issue of corporation tax, the Irish Government's position has been absolutely clear on this from day one. We are not going to change our rate of corporation tax because of the significant importance that that has to provide security and certainty to investors and potential investors in this country whom we need to create jobs. And I believe that position is more clearly understood among other European states and in the European institutions now than it had been, because over the course of the last year we've done quite an amount of work in explaining the importance of that rate of corporation tax, not just for Ireland but indeed in respect of investment in Europe and the importance to Europe of Irish economic recovery. The financial transactions tax, when that was originally proposed, the original idea of a Tobin tax in respect of financial transactions, that was originally conceived as a tax that would apply on a global basis. And our view is that that has merit. Applying it, however, to a limited number of countries has difficulty. There was a proposal that it might apply only to the Eurozone countries, and I think that's the proposal that you're referring to, Deputy Ross. That would cause the difficulties here in respect of the financial services centre and the financial services industry here. It would put us at a very competitive disadvantage, for example, with respect to London. And because of that reason, we said that that proposal would not be acceptable to us. The question of whether it could be applied on the basis of the 27 member states of the European Union, and that incidentally is part of the discussions in respect of the multi-annual financial framework for the European budget, which are underway at the moment, that is another question. But again, I think, in assessing that issue, you would have to look at how it would leave European Union states in respect of states that are outside of the European Union, like Switzerland, for example, and the competitive disadvantage that would apply there. And of course, the other issue that has to be taken into effect is that the issue of financial transactions is not just a regional issue. It's not just a European issue. It's an issue that this is a global business. And I think that within Europe, we would have to be very careful about progressing that proposal in a way that would leave Europe generally at a competitive disadvantage in respect of its financial services industry, but particularly the Irish Government is very conscious of not reaching any agreement on that will put Ireland at a competitive disadvantage.
Thank you, Tánaiste. Deputy Ross.
I'd like to thank the Tánaiste for that reply, which I take to mean that we won't put ourselves in a situation where the British are not imposing this tax and we are. That's what I take it to mean in shorthand, and if that's what it means, that's encouraging. Maybe he doesn't want to say it in quite such blunt terms, but I presume that's what he means when he makes the distinction between the Eurozone countries and the others. Could he answer just a very broader question then? How long are we going to put up with this extremely unhelpful and hostile attitude from Merkel and Sarkozy? We have now, ever since you came into power, been suffering the designs and the electoral designs at the hands of Sarkozy and Merkel. And I know, and you know, and the whole House knows, that this particular attack on our corporate tax, or on the corporate tax base, and indeed in terms of the financial transaction tax, is an electoral gimmick to some extent by two very powerful nations. And isn't it time that we said to them that we've had enough of this, that we are not going to be victims of the Franco-German political domestic agenda for any longer, that we're an independent country and our interests are putting Ireland first and not dancing to the Merkel-Sarkozy duet?
Thank you, Deputy.
Well, I mean, all I can say to that is to look at our record on this. When the issue, and you're aware that the issue of the 12.5% corporation tax rate was put very forcibly on the agenda by other member states when this government came into office in March of this year, and we very vigorously and very effectively rebutted and refuted that argument. We made it very clear, as you know, there was an attempt to get us to trade our position in respect of reducing the interest rate for concessions at the corporate tax rate. And we said we weren't going there. We said we were defending our corporate tax rate, and we explained very patiently and over time why that was important in order to encourage investment into this country. And I believe that we have won that argument. I am not surprised from time to time to see the proposal re-emerging. And I think that you have to look at the re-emergence of that proposal in the case of some countries, having regard to the electoral cycle in those countries. But our position is not going to be dictated by the electoral cycle in any other member state. Our position is soundly based. We have made it very clear. We are determined to defend that position. We believe that the 12.5% rate of corporation tax is important. It's important to attract investment, but more important perhaps than the rate itself is the certainty that it gives to potential investors. People who are looking at investing in Europe, and in particular investing in Ireland and creating jobs here, they need to have certainty about what our rate of corporation tax is and what the position of the government is in respect of that rate of corporation tax. And we have communicated that at European Union level, we've communicated it bilaterally to other European Union states, and we have communicated it globally to investors and potential investors, and that remains the case. 12.5% is our rate of corporation tax, and we are not in the business of changing it.
Thank you.